Hi folks, thanks for tuning in for another video. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Ontario Rat Folder. This is the Model 1. You'll often see this referred to online as the Rat 1 folder. It is model number ON8846-NG. I believe that NG stands for neon green. Of course, Ontario refers to this as Venom green. So this is the Venom green Rat Folder. Now I purchased this for about $30 from knifeworks.com. As far as I know, it is an exclusive to that particular website, so if you're interested in getting one, you might be able to find it other places, but I believe it was initially intended to be sold exclusively through knifeworks.com, so if you're wanting to get one, do please check them out. A good website. I've ordered from them a few times now, and they've got some really good prices. They ship fast, and they seem to be some good folks over there running that place. So definitely give them your time in business if you're ever curious. So again, that is the Model 1. You often hear this referred to as the Rat 1 folder. It is AUS 8 steel. You can see there on the side, this is made in Taiwan. So this, again, is the Venom green. There are many different Model 1 folders from Ontario. They're all pretty much identical in materials, design, and construction, other than just the different colored handles. And some will have a painted or coated blade. So you'll see a black blade. You might see, I think another KnifeWorks exclusive is the orange handles. There's a pale grayish green, there's a black handle, there's tan, all sorts of different colors. And of course, there is also a partially serrated model. So for those of you who like a combo edge, that is also available. I'm not sure if it's available on this exact color for the handle. I think it is. And I know that KnifeWorks also offers this same color handle with a black blade. So there's many different options for you as far as your colors and your blade style. And then also just recently released is the Model 2, which is pretty much an identical knife, but it is shrunk down. The blade is smaller, as is the handle, but otherwise it's the exact same design. So if this knife seems like it's a little bit too big for you, go ahead and check out that Model 2, and that might be a little bit better suited to your needs. Blade length is 3.5 inches, and that's from the pretty much the edge right where it comes out from the handle there to the tip, 3.5 inches, but the actual cutting edge is a lot closer to 3.25 inches. It is 8.6 inches long overall, and when closed it's about 5 inches long. So pretty decently long knife. I would consider this to be a medium to medium large folder. Weight comes in at 5 ounces. It weighed 4.9 on my scale, so I'd say 5 ounces is pretty darn accurate. And it's a little weighty. It won't feel too heavy in your pocket, but I do have some slight reservations with that. I think they could have made this knife a little bit lighter. I'll get into that in a second. As I mentioned, the steel in the blade is AUS 8. No rust issues so far. Thickness is about 3 millimeters, maybe a little bit thinner. On my calipers, it was coming in at like 2.89 millimeters. So decent thickness. Great drop point blade. I love the shape of this blade. I love the grind. It is, as you see, a full flat grind. And from the factory, this particular example was ground at a little bit thinner than 20 degrees per side. And as I use my Spyderco sharp maker set to 40 degrees inclusive, that is 20 degrees per side of the edge, I found it really easy to sharpen this up quickly. Since it was ground just a little bit thinner, it was easy for me to hit it on my stones right away to get it sharpened up just to my liking. Because of the AUS 8 steel, you will be sharpening this a bit more frequently than other steels, especially in the role that I think this knife is intended, which is sort of a hard use or work folder. If you're doing a lot of outdoor work or if you're doing some aggressive cutting, I think this would be a really good choice. But keep in mind that because of that AUS 8 steel, you're going to be sharpening this a little bit more often than, say, S30V or D2 or something like that, even 154 cm. So good all-around steel, takes a great edge. This particular knife takes a very keen edge, so you can get this very, very sharp and without a lot of trouble. I always kind of like that about AUS 8. It is a cheaper steel, but you know, the benefits are that it's so easy to sharpen and that it does take such a fine edge. So definitely keep that in mind and don't hold it against it that it is using a less expensive steel, especially when you consider how inexpensive the actual knife is overall. So I stropped this. I've been using this mostly at work recently. This has been one of my main work knives. I kind of swapped out my Spyderco Tenacious and my Cold Steel American Lawman to put this knife through its paces over the last couple months. And I find that I'm basically stropping it just a little bit every day, and I find myself sharpening it once a week to actually take it back to my Spyderco stones to get a nice working edge back on it. To me, that's low maintenance. To some of you, that might be pretty frequent, but keep in mind I do use this knife heavily every single work day, which is every weekday, Monday through Friday. This is getting quite a bit of a workout, so, you know, kind of temper your expectations with how hard you intend to use this knife when you're thinking about that. The handle material that we have is nylon 6, whatever that is. I'm going to kind of put that in the same category as FRN, Zytel, Grivery, those types of materials. Not as aggressive and not as refined feeling as G10, so it's a little bit smooth. It does feel a little plasticky, but it's still a really nice material, and they're able to give it all these great little color options, which is always handy and always a lot of fun. These bright colors are cool if you ever drop the knife, you know, and it's maybe in a dark environment, or you drop it in the grass or the brush. Having the bright orange or bright green or bright pink handle makes it really easy to find and retrieve it. The construction on this knife is Torx screws, which is common on a lot of folders. There are quite a few screws to hold this knife together. We have 13 T6 screws all throughout the body and 3 in the pocket clip. And then we have 2 T10. And usually you'll see T8. These are actually T10 at the pivot. So 2 of those there. It is not skeletonized. I think you can kind of see that there in the light. No holes, nothing milled out on either side of the handle. So these are just full slabs of steel. They're nice thick liners, but because it hasn't been skeletonized, the knife is a little bit heavier than I think it actually needs to be. I think that you could put some nice big holes throughout those liners, still keep this folder just as strong without losing any real strength or integrity. So I don't know if that was done as a cost-saving measure or what. It definitely gives the knife a very solid and hefty feel, but again, to me it feels heavier than it really needs to be. No big deal, just something to consider. We do have an open back design, so you see these 4 or 5 pillars run along the back, makes the knife easy to clean, depending on if you just want to run a rag or a paper towel through there, a little toothbrush or maybe some compressed air. It should be easy for you to keep this clean, even if it gets packed up with something, you know, like brush or grass or mud, something like that. It's going to be very easy to clean out, and that's really nice. Texturing on these handles, which is one of the things you'll hear from a lot of folks, is very light. Not very aggressive at all, and actually leans towards slippery. So that's one little ding against it. The handle shape with this little choil area here, this groove here, and then the jimping at the back of the knife do hold your fingers in place. So I don't think you're really going to be losing the knife, but at some point, if your hands are wet or otherwise slippery, if you're working, you know, if your hands are greasy or oily, if you're doing something messy, maybe some sort of mechanic work or working around machinery, you might find it a little bit slippery just as you're retrieving it from your pocket, or maybe if you're just picking it up from the handle, that might be an issue. It hasn't been a big deal for me, but I would have liked to have definitely seen some more aggressive texturing. This is a little bit on the slick side for my taste. As I mentioned, we do have some jimping at the back of the blade and inside the liner lock area there. The back of the blade, this jimping, as you can see, is really broad. It's really thick. It's got sort of like a sawtooth sort of pattern to it, and it works well, but it feels a little funny. It's not uncomfortable, it just seems like that some of the smaller serrations, and as an example, let me show you a Spyderco UK pen knife. You get it to focus in there. See that real small finger serrations that Spyderco uses? If I'm going to have jimping, I prefer something with this pattern, which to me is a lot nicer feeling, but still very aggressive and still holds your finger in place really well. So I would have preferred they went for something like that instead of this here. But again, it's not uncomfortable. It just isn't as effective as I think that it could be. This handle does have a lanyard hole, which is perfectly suitable for paracord or leather. It features a 4-way clip. I have this set to tip up. If I recall, this came tip down from the factory, right hand tip down, and it can be set either tip down or tip up, right or left-handed. So a little something for everyone. Very close to being a truly ambidextrous knife other than the liner lock, but if you're a left-handed knife user, you're probably at this point accustomed to using a liner lock that was actually intended for right-handed folks. So other than that, they really did make some nice considerations, letting everyone choose how they wanted to have the pocket clip set up. It is a nice long clip. Excuse me. It is a nice long clip here, and it sits pretty deeply, you know, the knife sits pretty deep within your pocket. Now, it's not a deep carry clip. There's about 3/4 of an inch sticking up out of your pocket, which might be a big deal for some folks, but it makes it easy to retrieve the knife if you do have it set in a tip-up position. and it holds the knife in your pocket very well. Because of the length of the clip and the tension, I don't think this knife's going to go anywhere, and I find the clip to be very comfortable. For the opening mechanism, we have dual thumb studs, again kind of leaning towards that ambidextrous notion, and they are of equal depth, equal thickness on either side, so lefties and righties should be able to flick the knife open or slowly open it with relative ease, regardless of which hand you tend to use for your knife. The pivot washers, I believe, are phosphor bronze and Teflon. So if you look down in there with a light, and you really aren't going to be able to see it in this lighting, I don't have a flashlight near me, you'll see that there's actually more than one washer on each side. There is Teflon and bronze on both sides. But it is a very smooth pivot, and once you have it tightened and adjusted to your own preference, I think you'll find that it actually opens very fast, very slick, very smooth. Feels really nice, not gritty or scratchy or slow at all, at least not to the tension that I have it set. Blade centering is relatively adjustable on mine. It was pretty good out of the box. I think it's darn near perfectly centered, as you can see there. That's something I don't normally care about, as long as it doesn't rub the liners on the inside of the handle. I'm not really too concerned with it, but once I had it set to my tension, it did just so happen to be perfectly centered, which is pretty nice. As I mentioned, it is a liner lock, and lockup's pretty good. This is after a couple months of using it. That's the travel on the lock right there. And I find that there is no up and down play. When I have it set to the exact tension at the pivot that I like, I do find there is a little bit of side to side play, but for me that isn't really a big deal, and it isn't really excessive. It's not a huge amount of travel or wobble from one side to the other. We have no rattling parts. You know, there's nothing clicking, nothing funky. There's no little clinking sounds or anything. That's always nice. Overall strength of the knife, especially considering those really thick and unskeletonized liners, is very high. I'd say this is a really strong, very excellently sturdy folder. Excellently? Is that a word? I don't think so. Anyway, I do think that it's quite stout, and I have a lot of trust and confidence both in the lock and in the overall design that this knife is going to hold up to years of medium to hard use for most folks. And fit and finish for this knife and in its price range, I think, are actually excellent. I think they're above average considering how much you pay to get one of these, which again is anywhere from $26 to maybe $35 depending on which model you choose and where you buy it from. A quick rundown of my pros and cons. I'll show you some comparisons and we'll shut this review down. I think that it's inexpensive, very inexpensive for what you get. I think this is probably one of the best values, and I'm not alone in that. If you look around online, read some other reviews, go on some of the online forums, you'll find that I think most folks agree with me that it is an excellent, excellent value considering all that you get and the price that you pay. Great quality. It's a nice large size. It's got an excellent blade shape, and it's got a really nice grind. I was really happy with that factory grind. The edge bevels were really nice right out of the factory. Very comfortable grip, although it is a bit slippery, and it's really strong. I like that it's got a nice snappy, strong clip on it. Easily sharpened, and you know, for the most part, other than that lock mechanism, it's very ambidextrous with the 4-way pocket clip and the dual thumb studs. So that all adds up to a really nice knife. If I had to pick some downsides, I'd say that it can be a little bit too slick or smooth in the handle texturing at times, which might be an issue for some folks because that texturing is so light, and it seems unnecessarily heavy. I really would have liked to have seen some hollowed out, milled out, or skeletonized handles, whatever you want to call it. I think that that does need to be done and would go a long way towards making the knife lighter while still maintaining its strength that it's got right now. Now I did adjust the pivot to my liking, like I said, and one thing that I didn't mention earlier, but I will say now, is that once I had that set to where I like it, the detent on the knife is not as strong as I would like to see for how long and hefty the blade is. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this on the camera. I'm probably going to send my tripod flying, but let me try and show you that actually without too much effort. See, I can't really do it, so it's kind of making it seem like it's not so, but without too much effort I can normally shake the blade out of the handle. Now it might look like I'm being really aggressive, and it's because I'm trying to do that motion in a really short space, but if I were to move off camera and shake it out, it actually comes out quite easily. So I don't know that that's really a big deal for most folks, but depending on which, you know, example you get when you purchase one, that might be a little bit looser than you like. I know some people prefer a really strong detent, some people like one that's really loose, but on mine I'd say it's kind of getting towards the looser, less aggressive detents as far as, you know, blade retention in the handle. The coating on the clip is one issue that that I had with it. I'll probably just remove the coating entirely, but just after a couple months it's got quite a bit of wear. You can see a lot of it's rubbed off, And you know, these coatings to me are kind of silly. I know they do kind of cut down on the shininess of the clip, but I would have rather just not had it there altogether. But again, that's not that big of a deal, and if you don't like it, you can always sand it or buff it off yourself. The jimping on the back of the blade could be a little bit better, and I kind of wish that the thumb studs, they're really, really smooth and slick and slippery. I wish they could have been a little bit more aggressively textured on the sides, just to give you a little bit more of a grab, and right on the very most, you know, topmost dome of each of them, they're really smooth and slick. So sometimes with gloves, you might kind of misfire as you go to open the blade. But that's really it. I mean, you know, my downsides that I have, you know, my objections that I have to some of the parts of the design really don't come close to how satisfied I am with it. I really am happy with the knife. So a lot of times you'll see this knife compared to the Spyderco Tenacious, which I think is a fair comparison. They ring in at pretty similar prices, fairly similar quality and overall construction. Obviously we've got a different length in the blade, different handle design. They're different knives in a lot of ways, but I think that they fill the same role. And depending on what you're doing with the knife, I think that should factor into which one you choose. If you want something, I would say between the two, as far as like a heavier duty blade, I would almost say that the Rat was probably a little bit more towards that hard use kind of knife action, just given those thicker liners. And the longer blade, I think, can sometimes help depending on the task. One of the things to consider is that the Tenacious, and I'm going to try and get these blades side by side, you can see that the blade is longer on the Rat 1 folder, but the cutting edge is actually just a pinch shorter, at least to my eyes. But they're real close. I do, for my purposes, I do prefer the belly on the Rat 1 because you see how it's got that sharper upswept curve. To me, that's a little bit more useful than this less, you know, more of a broad and less sharp angle to the sloping belly on the Tenacious. But they're still really, really close, and honestly, between the two, if I had to choose one or the other, I would probably choose the Tenacious, because even though the blade on the Rat 1 sort of wins out, I like the quick opening of the round opening hole, and I wear gloves at work. So for me, this one is guaranteed opening every time, whereas the thumb studs are a little bit more difficult. So I'm going to put those two side by side, and these are just size comparisons for now. I'll just show you a few different knives. Here is the Kershaw Skyline. Let's move these guys up real quick and put that one in there just to kind of give you some idea. If you have some of these other knives, that'll kind of show you. Here's a knife with a similar blade shape. That is the SOG Flash 2. Really similar blade shape, although it slopes a bit more on that drop point than on the Rat folder. What else do we have here? Cold Steel American Lawman. These now that you are seeing these together, the top three knives are actually my work knives. These are the three main knives I use at work every weekday. So I'll give you some size comparison there. And then real quick, I know I'm going really Spyderco happy here, but I'll put at the bottom the Endura. Very similar in overall length, although the Endura is much thinner and much lighter. And then finally, the Paramilitary 2. So I'll bring that one in there so you can see. So there's a few size comparisons for some of you folks that might own some of these other knives and are curious how the Rat is going to fit in and maybe how that handle comfort's going to work out for you. Overall, I do highly recommend it. I think it stands almost alone as one of the best knife values out there as far as a nice, if you want something for camping, hiking, outdoor activities. Now we're not talking about batoning or spine whacking or whatever it is that guys are doing where they're beating the tar out of their knife, where a fixed blade would probably be a better choice. But if you have an outdoor or hard use activity where you want a folding knife, I think that the Rat would make a fantastic choice. If you want something a little bit smaller, you might consider the Rat too. But as it stands, again, I do think this is probably one of the best values on the market in a folding knife. Great size, great shape, very comfortable. There's so many reasons to get it and so very few not to, that I think everyone should at least pick one up and try it. And for the price that you can pick one up for, there's almost no reason to avoid checking it out at some point. So there you have it, my review of the Ontario Rat folder, the Model 1 in Venom or Neon Green. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.